Hello and welcome, bienvenidos, for this segment of De Todo Un Poco and John Redmann Power of Attorney Election Special. Our special guest is Suzanne Montero, candidate for Judge, Jueza, for Civil District Court in Orleans Parish. Susie, thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate it.
Sure. So, our viewers will want to know about this race, Judge in Civil District Court in Orleans Parish. What is the judgeship? What is a judge in Civil District Court? Tell us, what is that?
In Orleans Parish, we have two separate systems, one for the criminal court and one for the civil court. The civil court judges handle matters such as personal injury, contract disputes, land use disputes, injunctions, interdictions. There's a portion of the court also that deals with family matters, domestic, divorces, custody, alimony, child support, and domestic violence.
Okay. And this court, this covers people that live where?
It is all of Orleans Parish, from Algiers to Broadmoor to Lakeview to Holly Grove to the Ninth Ward. Everybody who is an Orleans Parish citizen who is a registered voter can vote in this election.
Okay. And if you live in the parish and you have a legal matter, you can be sued in that court. You can bring a lawsuit in that court, correct?
Absolutely. That is the court of the original jurisdiction in general for most matters that arise out of either business transactions or injuries or accidents that occur in New Orleans.
So what would be your role if you were elected to be judge in that court?
As the judge is sort of the person who helps the lawyers manage the litigation. In most cases, you have a lawyer for, like, for example, an insurance company, and a lawyer maybe for an injured person, and they have a dispute over whether or not somebody should be compensated, and the judge helps manage those lawyers so that the litigants can posture their case best so that they can either reach a settlement or if they need to go to trial, that they're able to go to trial to get a resolution of their problems.
And if it goes to trial, do you make the decision?
Sometimes the judge makes the decision, sometimes it doesn't. Louisiana allows for jury trials under certain circumstances, and if your case fits into that category of cases, a jury would decide, but the judge would still be managing the case so that the case was properly presented and fairly presented to the jury.
Okay. Thank you. Now, tell me about in the courtroom, anyone that lives in Orleans Parish or someone maybe who doesn't live in Orleans Parish can file a lawsuit that brings a lawsuit in Orleans Parish. What are some of the issues that you see that impact the administration of justice in the courthouse, and maybe that you'd like to try and help improve?
Well, that's a very good question. I've been practicing law for 25 years, and all 25 years I have practiced in Orleans Parish. I've never worked anywhere else other than New Orleans. And Civil District Court is where I cut my teeth and where I've spent the majority of my time. One of the issues that I frequently see that impacts the people in New Orleans is access to the courts with regard to money. There's opportunities for certain litigants to not have to pay the cost if they are eligible under certain statutes, but that is something that is a known problem in Civil District Court. The other issue is that some people can't afford a lawyer, and so there are a lot of, we call them pro se, which translates to on their own. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who go to court without a lawyer. And you're entitled to represent yourself if you want to. It's not necessarily always recommended because some areas of the law can be very complex. But the pro se litigant presents a unique challenge to the courts, the judges, and the lawyers on the other side.
Many of our viewers are minorities, and a very large growing percentage of our population are Hispanics. A concern that many of the Hispanics or Latinos have is whether or not they can expect to be treated fairly in our legal system and in our courtrooms. What message would you offer to them in response to that concern?
Well, the Hispanic and Latina community has been a growing and very, very important portion of New Orleans, certainly since Hurricane Katrina and even long before that. I personally have in my practice, my paralegal, my assistant, is from Nicaragua, and she and I have worked together for about 12 to 13 years. And accordingly, all of the Hispanic cases that come into my office end up at my desk. I have represented dozens and dozens and dozens of Hispanic people and families. The issues that come up in the actual litigation is to make sure that there's a proper translator, to make sure that if the litigant is pro se, if they're
when you say litigant, let's make sure everybody understands.
the person who is either suing or being sued.
Okay.
If a Hispanic family finds themselves in court, I think it's incumbent upon the court to ensure that there's proper translation of both the documents as well as the proceedings in court, so that they know what's going on, so that their voice can be heard and their issues can be addressed.
And when a litigant has a lawyer, and who pays for the interpreter?
It depends on the case. There are cases out there where, for example, in a criminal case where the state pays for the interpreter. Sometimes in civil cases, the Hispanic family or the Hispanic litigant their lawyer would have to front the money for the interpreter, but would ultimately recoup that money in the event that there was a judgment in favor of the Hispanic party.
Right. So if they are successful in whatever they're suing over, they can get not only some compensation if they're suing for compensation.
Correct.
They can be reimbursed money.
For the cost of the interpreter. And there are court-appointed interpreters, I want to say court-qualified interpreters. I've been involved in several cases where we have had people come in that suggest that they are qualified to interpret in court. This is something that's very important, to make sure that the interpreter actually is interpreting the proceedings correctly. And I have been involved in situations where, because my paralegal is fluent in Spanish, mm-hmm. she would tell me, Susie, this is not an accurate translation, and we've had to address that. So it's important that the court system and that the judge and that the jury know that what they're hearing out of the interpreter's mouth is actually what the party is saying.
A good translation.
A good translation.
Okay.
And an accurate one.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're going to have to pause for a minute for a short break. We'll be right back, though. Welcome back. Continuing on with our discussion with Susie Montero, candidate for judge in Civil District Court, I want to ask you about you and why you believe that voters out there, Hispanics, African Americans, Anglo voters, anybody, should consider you as the person who deserves a vote over anyone else who's running for the same spot.
Great question. First one is experience. I have actually tried jury trials and judge trials in this court. Multiple jury trials, multiple judge trials in this court, as well as other courts. It's important for a judge to have had experience in a courtroom, understanding how a judge trial or a jury trial works before they get on the bench. The second is, over the 25 years that I've practiced, I've represented a wide range of citizens in New Orleans as well as throughout the state of Louisiana, both African Americans, Hispanics, publicly traded corporations, children, victims of domestic violence. My practice has been broad and varied, and I've had the experience necessary so that I can bring that experience to the bench to better serve the citizens of New Orleans.
Okay. And in addition to your experience, what about your background? Anything else about you personally that you believe helps you or has prepared you for the responsibilities of making decisions that will impact the lives of other people?
That kind of dovetails with the experience I've had in law. You know, when I first started practicing, I thought that lawyers who had more experience than me were just smarter than me. As I've moved farther in my career, I realized that it's not that they were smarter than me. It's just that they had had the experience in life and the experience in law that gave them a perspective to be able to see through the weeds, to see what was important for the litigants to be able to get their case resolved as expeditiously as possible. I'm New Orleans born, New Orleans bred. I've said it before. I'm gonna when I die, I'll be New Orleans dead. So I love this city, and I love the amazing different colors of our people that make up this beautiful gumbo. And I'm gonna dedicate the rest of my career here.
Okay. Tell us about your platform, to the extent you haven't covered it. Your platform, your goals if you are elected judge for Civil District Court in Orleans Parish.
Well, it's difficult for judges to have a platform per se because judges don't legislate, and I can't make any promises to any litigants. But what I can promise is that when I'm elected, I will run the courtroom efficiently, so there won't be delays. Justice delayed is justice denied. I will be prepared, and I will ensure that everybody's filings and pleadings have been considered and that their voices are heard in court. And I will treat all litigants, regardless of their station in life, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, with equal dignity.
Let's take one more short break, and I think we're just about concluded here. We'll be right back after one more short break. Welcome back to the show. We are talking with Suzanne Montero, candidate for judge for Orleans Parish. The election is March 25th, 2017, so please get out there and vote, everyone. Here's a question that I like to ask all candidates. I'd like you to describe a situation in which you took, in your professional life as an attorney, because you have not yet ascended to the role of judge, where you took a controversial or an unconventional position as an attorney, as a professional, or maybe some related situation, and how you handled the reaction that you got because you were controversial. You had to make a tough decision.
The first thing that comes to mind is and it's still currently going on, representing a young woman who's a victim of human trafficking. And the initial, it's a civil action arising out of her being brutally beaten at a motel in the New Orleans area. And the original approach to that was that that she chose this life for herself, and so, you know, what did you expect? And we had to educate the court and educate the judge as to what the circumstances were that led this woman, who had not had the best opportunities available to her through education and health care throughout her life. And once we were able to educate the court as to this isn't what it's being presented to you, the court took a very different approach to it and recognized that this was a woman who had no voice and who had been overlooked and abused much of her life. That is something that often, you know, there's a lot of people that don't have somebody to speak for them. And those people are the people who get forgotten in the court system, the judicial system, and in our economy often. And I think that as officers of the court, and that's what lawyers will call themselves, officers of the court, we represent the court. We have an obligation to make sure that when we have the vulnerable and the overlooked in front of us, that we recognize that and we don't let the system bulldoze them.
Okay. Let's change gears a little bit. Having practiced all those years in the very same courthouse you hope to be sitting as a judge soon in. Can you describe some changes or improvements you might like to make in that court? How it operates, how that court interacts with the public, handles cases?
The court, and it's a well-known issue in New Orleans, the court needs a new building. The court itself should be a reflection of the honor of the city and its people, and that court is dated and has some physical plant issues. That's a complex political bailiwick, and I hope that when I am on the bench that I will be able to assist with the other judges and the other decision makers so that we can make that come true. So that's sort of the global. From the perspective of Division B, my courtroom that I'll be able to run, one of the things I would hope for is expedited hearing dates for discovery so that the lawyers and the litigants can get the information they need so that they can resolve their cases.
Okay. Do you have any views on whether the court as a whole deals effectively with racial issues or bias issues in the community?
That's a hard question because there are 14 separate judges, and each judge runs his or her own courtroom. I have always felt as a practitioner in New Orleans that because the judges are elected throughout the entire parish, that there's more of a level playing field for people from different races, the African Americans, the white New Orleanians, Vietnamese, the Hispanics. I think that the Hispanic population needs better representation in civil district court for a lot of reasons, everything from translation to access to the court. For example, the website for the court is there's not a Spanish website. The forms that are provided in the clerk's office are not in Spanish. Those are some changes that could be made that would help access to the court for some of the underserved populations.
And do you see that as something you would like to work towards changing? Or?
Much of that is not in a judge's hands. Much of that is with the clerk of court. But the clerk of court is a woman by the name of Dale Atkins, who does everything that she can to make the court more efficient. So those are some suggestions that I would like to work with the clerk's office to implement that, because when things are amiss in the clerk's office, that trickles down to the individual divisions. And as much communication as there can be between the judge's office and the clerk's office, the better that is for the people who have to be served in that courtroom.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time. Any last comments or any last words you'd like to share with our voters?
Well, I have worked tirelessly for 25 years trying cases in this court, representing the people of New Orleans. I would appreciate your vote on March 25th. You'll find me at numero once, Marcia Suzanne Montero, numero once on the ballot. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
You're sharing your insights and outlook for the position. This is John Redmann. Yo soy el abogado Juan Redmann. This is a special election, an election special for De Todo Un Poco and for Power of Attorney. We'll visit with all of you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.